The business case. We're going to do a business case and figure out what we can measure and what we can't. And this is, let's see. And this starts now. So, we were talking about what can be your company goals. Things you should be doing, obviously targeting your company goals. But what expense, actually, I may be crowdsourcing something here, but there are an awful lot of folks to crowdsource this. Expenses, revenues, activities, and metrics. What do you have to measure? Go ahead. Anyone?
Product sales.
Sales. What do you have online to measure?
Visitors.
I'm sorry?
Visitors.
Impressions.
Impressions. Share
Share of conversation.
of conversations. Share of conversations. How do you mean?
How much is my
How much of the conversation about a product or service is my brand or my competitor's brand receiving?
Right, and if you break down further, there are the tweets, there are the references, there's sentiment. Sentiment, as you drill down, can be measured positive, negative, or neutral. No one's really doing it right because, as was brought up here and so many times, sentiment measurement is at best a vague science at the moment for two reasons. One, sarcasm, two, regionality. For instance, wicked cool, that's neutral. Wicked awesome is neutral. Wicked the movie is negative. Wicked the musical is negative. And that's only New England. To have positive, super awesome is a positive sentiment. There are a lot of tough ways to do this, and there are a lot of good people working on measuring sentiment. So you have the sentiment, you have the share of conversations. Actually, someone mentioned that one of the particular tool sets, and I think this number is right, that it's a 30% margin of error at the moment in sentiment. And that's a pretty huge number, but I think that's real as I started doing some of the math. Now that we have the measures, or some of the metrics, what else? What else would you measure if you could? Yes, Mike?
Raw number of customer interactions, right?
Customer interactions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Nonprofits, value system, loyalty, and perhaps even lives change. If you're trying to change behavior or actually see people improve the quality of life.
Okay, so that's value system loyalty. And life's changed. You modify that a little bit, and it can be used in any area, really. Not necessarily just nonprofit, but absolutely. Goes back to retention again, too, which, and I'm going to use retention as one of them because that's something that you may be able to measure fairly easy. Date of first purchase, date of first interaction. So now you can develop a number of days, a number of months, time between people, but it does take a little time to get these together. How complicated is it really now? You can do a lot of this in Excel if you don't have, the resources to do this more, depending on the size of who you're dealing with. I know we're talking about measuring social media. I apologize that this is one of the most boring topics in the world. It is also, and some of you are shaking your head, no, thank you so much. That's so kind of you, but we're trying to find out now, and I'm going to ask you, what else would you measure? What else can we measure? Or what else would you like to measure one day? Sir?
New customers versus returning customers.
New versus returning. Okay. Yes?
Calls avoided. So I used to work in an organization that had a fairly large call center. Every time a customer called, it cost $14. They had millions of customers. Every call avoided saves $14. So the calls avoided, the amount of interactions I can have through your social channel like Twitter, which is 140 characters. Okay? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So we talked about customer retention and interaction and customer service, right? But every call that I avoid saves me money. One call center rep can have multiple windows up and have multiple interactions at the same time. There's huge customer savings there. And also, if I'm interacting on a social channel like that, I'm answering questions that other customers might have at the same time because they're seeing it publicly. So those are some of the things I look for.
Awesome. Let me piggyback onto that. When I was at Intel, one of the first things I did is take over the knowledge base, and we started looking at what people were searching on. And what we then did was looked at the words, tried to see where they got out, did they find what they didn't find, what they looked for. And I was not all Intel. At this point, I was in one business unit. The business unit at that point was new, did $150 million a year. The first year in deflection to the call center was $26 million. Wait, we only made 125 to 150 that year, and we deflected $26 million in support costs. The next thing we found out is people didn't read the manual to start it off. That was $10 million in savings. We put it on the web, and we gave them a quick start guide, which cost a lot less than a 600-page book. You may remember books. They're very popular at one point. So that was a lot of call avoidance. There are a lot of areas you can measure call avoidance, which is not the same as revenue. But when you start looking at the behavior patterns, what people are talking about, what they're not talking about, what they use on your website, what they don't use on your website, are they going off your site to other things? If so, what? So you need a good analytics package. If you can't afford one, Google Analytics is a great place to begin. And it's not that complicated either. The second year we started going, we found, looking through all that information, a $50 million revenue stream. Okay, wait, we made like 125, 150 year one, and we just found another 50 million to start. Yeah, that was good. That's when Intel bought us, actually, so it worked out. So do you have metrics that you look at every day, numbers that you look at, content that you look at? We're talking about content, we're talking about interactions. If we measure the interactions, if we look at the content that's being used, and we do the boring math work to see what happens, then we can start looking and testing some things. What's going to work, what's not going to work. Caution. You find a correlation. There are correlations of convenience and correlations of confidence. The difference is one matches what's happening. The other one doesn't. And the other one could be very costly. So, just for an example, tonight the bars will open and the sun will go down. I am pretty sure one has nothing to do with the other. Mathematically, I can prove one causes another. The math is wrong. I've always wanted to just say that line. From second grade on. But the math is wrong. Actually, the math is right. What happens is we're tying behaviors. So what's causing the behavior? And then you can test it out. You can test it out with different tweets. You can test it out with different content. Even Google Analytics lets you test it out with different pages from time to time. Let me ask you a question. How many of you, I'm really curious why you want to know how to measure social media. How many of you are in a company where sales is the driver? Where content is the driver? In the nonprofit sector or education sectors? The one thing we have in common is how are people using information, how are people talking about us, and how are people ultimately going to make decisions about us, and what can we do to increase the key values that we want. The engagement of others, growing volunteers, growing employees, finding it easier to hire people, find it easier for people to be our advocates. We had a really good case where, yeah, I'm not going to tell you which one though. Someone was talking about us poorly. I can't tell you which angle yet. And it was on Twitter, and I sat back and watched. And about 10 minutes later, 3 people became brand advocates for us. We didn't have to answer. They did. yeah, we sent them each one, you know, something nice, because those are the people that are very valuable. If you can identify your advocates, that's an incredibly powerful thing. Done.
That wasn't a, by the way, can you say something? They just said it unaided.
Unaided. Now, could you say something? No, that's bad. I wouldn't do. No. And they weren't employees, and the only thing I know they had to do with our product is I know one of the three had purchased product before. The other two, I have no idea. Maybe but they were following us, and they know us, and they're going, no, that's not right. So you are building a community, and how would you measure that? How would you measure when people are stepping in for you? That is the difficult part. How do we explain it to someone who doesn't know about community? This is really very simple. Remember when your folks, think back, you were about 5 years old and you were sitting in front of the house and your folks were talking to the neighbors and they were telling them about the new store that you were totally bored with. Okay? There was value in that to that store that they couldn't measure. Real simple. Another story is someone called me over about a year ago to their computer to read a story about social media. And I said, wow, that's a good story. Anyone else? Did he write anything else? And this is a moment that lives forever. I wrote the story. They didn't notice the byline. True. But how do you measure a conversation like that that's going to change business? How do you measure a conversation that two people are having or more about you or your company that will change things? One, we actually mentioned some of them before. Positive attributes and mentions. Quantify them. How many people are following? Is that a real measurement? Is that a valid measurement? Followers? Why not, Jackie?
I don't know about the followers I have. Some of them are just random people.
Some are random people. Some are bots, robots. Yes?
You could only have 7 followers, but those 7 people could be incredibly important people.
Right. You can have 7 followers, but they could be incredibly powerful and incredibly important people. Give you a good idea with Destination Imagination, we had about 150 followers at the time I started it. And any of you know Tim O'Reilly from O'Reilly Media? Yeah. The tweet we sent was Destination Imagination, creative problem solving for kids with no vendor interference. Someone forwarded it, retweeted it, and then Tim O'Reilly gave it to 1.5 million viewers, or potentially 1.5 million at the time. That's ridiculous. What did that do for us? We don't know. It didn't hurt. It's great.